Well, good morning. I'm going to start with a little bit of nonsense that has nothing to do with what I'm going to talk about today. But yesterday, early to mid-afternoon, I had 312 people that had viewed yesterday's videos. Last night, by the time I went to bed, I still had 312 that viewed it. And this morning, I still have 312. So I guess at some point over the past, oh God, more than 12 hours, nobody watched that video. Or about 12 hours, whatever it's been. I don't know exactly what time I saw the 312, but it hasn't changed, and none of the other numbers seem to have changed at all. So the tally, the count on my YouTube videos has been died, I guess, for at least temporarily. And tallying and keeping count is actually what I'm going to be talking about this morning. So I guess it is apropos and relevant that I started there. The title that I've chosen is Divine Tally. Persistent resistance is how we vote. Perhaps many still have not considered the warning in the adage, silence is consent. Yeah, I know we have that so-called spiritual dictum, what you resist persists. They seem to contradict each other, at least to me. When does change come? How does it come? As long as abuses are sufferable, it has been human nature to suffer. Our very religions even make suffering in silence to be considered a spiritual achievement, a virtue, if you will. Look, what a saint. She is so peaceful. Is peaceful another name for oblivious denial? Let's consider together and decide. I'm going to read another quote that I looked up just a couple of minutes ago, quickly before I began today's video. And it's a quote by Henry David Thoreau. Most men live lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with a song still in them. Indeed, the human history, if it teaches anything, teaches the complacency of man. And I believe we've been programmed to be complacent and to suffer injustice in silence. And as I said in my blurb, this has been exalted to a virtue. Who creates these virtues, if you will, of silence is golden? Who do these things serve? What you resist persists. Who would that serve in a world where injustice and greed and struggle and abuses prevail and predominate the landscape, predominate the cultures, not just in one little locality, but around the world? Who would it serve to have people believe what you resist persists? So shut up and get on with your life. Do your job, party if you want, but don't bitch about the circumstances because you can't fight City Hall. And who are you? Who are you? It must be the will of God, because obviously this is what's happening. It must be God's will. I pondered these things a lot yesterday. When I went to bed last night, I went to bed actually early, about between 20 after and 9:30. I went to bed. I got back up about an hour later and then went to bed again, ironically at 11:11. And it took me a while even then to fall asleep. I was struggling. I was wrestling with the idea of not wanting to resist. I mean, I want my life, like everybody else, to be peaceful. I want to live and be left alone with in my home, in my circumstances, doing what I'm doing. I want to be left alone. Obviously, for those of you that have been listening, especially this past week, you know that the courts, or especially Miss Kimberly Rosanka, has reared her beautiful head, and she's a pretty woman, once again, without principle, trying to steal my home. And it just infuriates me. I spent a lot of time yesterday in anger, frustration. And a part of me resists the idea of taking yet another action, another step, creating yet another document. I've put it off for the last, since Thursday or Friday and Saturday. I mean, every day so far, I've looked at things, I've wanted to get it done, and I've put it off. And it doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. It persists. And I was looking at this yesterday, and I'm thinking, the things we don't like are going to persist, whether we look at them or not, until we change them, until we take action, until we speak up and let our voices be heard. It's not a matter of having some rule that is 100% accurate in every circumstance of life. Life just doesn't work that way in a dualism, in a dualistic culture where we have opposites that dance with each other and play off of each other. That's why you have to be able to get your mind and your heart and your consciousness around the paradox. Because what works in one instance doesn't work in another instance. Where silence is required at one point, absolutely silence is the wrong thing to do in another point. And you have to weigh and determine the wisdom in your own heart. Each of us has to do that. Each of us has to do that. Which is why Carl Jung said, the inordinate number of spiritual weaklings makes paradoxical truth dangerous. There are no rules that are applicable in every circumstance. They're just, if there's any rule, I guess it would be love. But that is so broad and so generalized. What is love? What is love? We are love. And love is not just what we are. It's what we do all the time. Is it? I mean, I'm just speaking by rote. Love is what we do. Love is what we are. Is it? Is it love when we watch injustices and suffering and remain silent? Is that love? When we see somebody drowning in despair and we rightly or wrongly say there's nothing I can do. And oftentimes when somebody is drowning in despair, there isn't much we can do, except maybe to listen, except maybe to open our ears and hear. But of course, then we have to get close to the pain. And some of us don't want to do that. We'd rather only be in the energy field of someone who is peaceful, who is resigned to, isn't it a lovely world? No, it's not a lovely world. The world sucks. Thank you very much. The world is filled with all sorts of things that just are not any longer sufferable, which is why the Occupy Wall Street movement has started, which is why before that the Tea Party movement started. Both of them want the same thing. Not in every aspect, but in many aspects. They want the same thing. They want a restoration of justice. They want a restoration of order. Both want peace. Both want freedom. Freedom to be left alone, to live their lives. But as Henry David Thoreau says, most men and women live lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with their song still in them. I paraphrased a couple of places there. Are you going to go to the grave, your grave, with your song still in you? Or are you going to let passion drive you and let your emotion and your sense of justice move you to actually speak out and do something? There is a divine tally. I'm convinced of it. Spirit takes note of how much we're willing to accept. And I honestly believe that the only way we're going to change the world, the only way this transformation is going to come, is through persistent resistance. We must resist what is unjust. We must resist what is unfair. We must resist those who would take our rights and trample all over us and steal from us. We must stand up. We must stand up and let our consciousness be heard. Let our voice be heard. Our consciousness is always heard. Our consciousness might be apathy, but sometimes anger is the proper thing. You say, Ron, anger is not good. Anger is a negative emotion. Fear is a negative emotion. Well, I fear that if we don't get angry enough, if we don't speak up, the they that we all so easily hate when we see them and recognize what they are doing to us, they will win. Because that's how it works. Silence is consent. That's why when I took the long line of abuses, as long as the abuses are sufferable, that's from the Declaration of Independence. People tend to want to suffer in complacency. But this is not a time for complacency. Not in my life, not in the life of humanity. It is not a time for complacency. This is a time to rise up and resist that which is evil. That which is backwards. That which is upside down. And we've got it all wrong. We've got so many things all wrong because we've been brainwashed to stay apathetic. We've been brainwashed to stay complacent. That's why the powers that be are putting police forces and military against the voice of the people. They'd like to squash dissent or create so much of it that will give them the excuse to squash it with a more firm hand. Even concentration camps are talked about. Massive concentration camps. Is that what we want? They derive their power from us. They really do. And when we are silent, and when good people do nothing, evils triumph. Evils continue. Only when enough people become dissatisfied and let their voices be heard and take positive action, not take up arms and start killing, not violence. That is not the way to do it. But there must be a peaceful resistance, a peaceful non-compliance with rules that are insane. We are free only if we exercise freedom. We are not free if we refuse to. That is not freedom. And as long as anybody is suffering, we all suffer. We all suffer because we are part of the whole. You may have a good job and are still working. You may have a secure family, a loving family. Everything might be going well in your life. But I ask you, can you not see the world around you? Are you oblivious? Are you disconnected so much that you cannot hear the cry of those that suffer, those that are victims? And I know I can do this mental game of saying we're not victims. We don't have to play victims. But in this world, we are victims. Every one of us is the victim of what we believe to be true. And when we believe a lie, we're victims of the lie. Yeah, we're victims of the lie that we're separate and disconnected. We're victims of that lie. We've been victims of that lie all of our lives. That's why we've lived lives of quiet desperation, and why lifetime after lifetime we've gone to the grave without our passion being activated, without producing the changes that must be brought forth. Now, maybe it wasn't time then, but my brother and sister, I'm telling you, it is time now. This is our time, and we are the ones that must stand up. You and I, each of us, must play our role and do our part. We can't do everything. I can't be in all the Occupy meetings that I'd like to go to. I can't be in all the demonstrations. I was trying initially, but it was overwhelming for me. I was absolutely feeling overwhelmed. And now this lawsuit thing, it's calling for my attention. And I resist having to take yet another step, because all they've ever done in the past is ignore me. And what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result. Each time I've taken the step forward, I've expected a result, that they wouldn't ignore me, that they would listen to the truth. But they haven't. The courts haven't. This woman lawyer, this Kimberly Rosanka, she hasn't listened. She's still hell-bent on stealing my home. And these things go on and on and on in our lives. I'm sorry, but I don't believe what we resist persists. I believe what we ignore and deny persists until we stand up and let our voices be heard and take action, whatever action each of us can take. And it may be a different thing for each of us, but we must take action. We must let our voice and our vote count. And who's keeping score? The universe is. That's how consciousness is measured, I believe. I leave these thoughts with you this morning, and I trust that you will weigh them and go inside yourself and say, what can I do that will make a difference? Everyone can do something. Think about it. Namaste, and thank you.